It was supposed to be just another routine shift at the restaurant. I'd been working there for a few months, and while it had its quirks, nothing ever happened that could be called unusual until that night. The restaurant was tucked away in a quiet part of town, with old brick walls and flickering neon lights that always seemed to struggle against the dark. The kind of place that only attracts locals and a few late-night wanderers. My shift started at 10 p.m., and I was working the closing shift alone, with only the head chef and one other employee, Sam, left to help with the final cleanup. Everything was normal at first. The quiet hum of the refrigerators, the clinking of dishes, and the occasional chatter between Sam and me. But as the clock inched closer to midnight, something felt off. The restaurant seemed unusually still, like it was holding its breath. Around 11:30, Sam went to the back to sort out some supplies, leaving me alone up front. I was busy wiping down the counter when I heard it, a faint whispering coming from the dining area. I brushed it off as a draft or perhaps just my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, the restaurant had been empty for hours. But then the whispering grew louder, more insistent. It was as if someone or something was trying to communicate with me, but the words were just out of reach. My skin crawled as I tried to focus on my work, my hands shaking slightly as I wiped the surfaces. I decided to check the dining area. Maybe it was just the sound of pipes or the old building settling. I turned on the lights, but everything seemed perfectly normal. The tables were empty, the chairs stacked neatly. I even checked the kitchen and storage areas, but Sam was nowhere to be found. I went back to the front, my nerves on edge, and that's when I saw it, a figure standing in the corner of the dining area. At first, it looked like a shadow, but as I squinted, I could make out the shape of a person. They were wearing old-fashioned clothes, like something out of a 1920s photo. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" But the figure didn't move. Instead, it seemed to dissolve into the shadows, as if it was never there at all. My heart was racing now, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Just then, Sam reappeared, looking disheveled and out of breath. "Hey, sorry about that," he said. "I got caught up in something." I wanted to tell him about the figure, but before I could, the restaurant's lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. We scrambled to find the flashlight, and when we finally got some light, the restaurant was a mess. Tables were overturned, chairs scattered, and the floor was covered in something that looked like old, blackened footprints. The whispering was back, louder and more frantic. It sounded like a chorus of voices, all pleading or warning. Sam and I were both terrified. We tried to clean up, but the more we did, the worse things seemed to get. The kitchen doors slammed shut on their own, and the temperature dropped so suddenly that we could see our breath. Every time we turned our backs, we heard more whispering, as if the restaurant itself was alive and trying to communicate something to us. Finally, when the clock struck 1 a.m., the lights flickered back on, and everything went eerily silent. The mess was gone as if it had never been there. The restaurant was just as it had been before, except for one thing, a note on the counter. It read, "Leave this place and never return." We didn't need to be told twice. We finished up as quickly as we could and got out of there. I don't know what we experienced that night, but it was something I'd never want to go through again. I don't even work there anymore. Whenever I pass by that place, I can't help but shiver and remember the whispers, the figure, and the terrifying, unseen presence that made that shift and night I'll never forget. My older brother, Alex, and I were home alone while our parents were out for the evening. We'd planned a movie marathon and a bunch of junk food, a rare treat when the house was empty. Little did we know, the night would turn into something far more sinister. As soon as our parents left, Alex and I settled into the living room with our snacks and movies. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. We were laughing and joking, enjoying our freedom, when the first thing out of the ordinary happened. A loud bang came from upstairs. It was so sudden and jarring that we both froze, staring at each other wide-eyed. Alex tried to reassure me. "It's probably just the house settling," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. I wanted to believe him, but something about the sound felt too deliberate, too insistent. After a few minutes of uneasy silence, we decided to check it out. We grabbed a flashlight and headed upstairs. The sound had come from the attic, a place we rarely ventured. Alex led the way, his flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. The air grew colder as we approached the attic door. It was an old, wooden door with a rusty lock, one that we hadn't used in ages. Alex unlocked it, and we climbed the creaky steps to the attic. It was filled with old furniture, dusty boxes, and forgotten relics. Everything seemed normal until we noticed something out of place, a single, large, black suitcase in the middle of the room. It wasn't there the last time we had been up here, and it looked brand new. Did Mom and Dad buy a new suitcase and forget to put it away? I asked, trying to lighten the mood. Alex shook his head. I don't think so. Let's see what's inside. My heart pounded as Alex unzipped the suitcase. Inside, we found a collection of strange items, old photographs, some of people we didn't recognize, and a large, dusty book with a leather cover. The book was open to a page with bizarre symbols and a drawing of what looked like a distorted, grotesque face. As we examined the book, a chilling draft swept through the attic. The temperature dropped, and I could see my breath in the air. Then we heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps coming from downstairs. Did you hear that? I whispered, my voice trembling. Alex nodded, his face pale. We hurried back downstairs, but the house was eerily quiet. The living room was exactly as we had left it, and there was no sign of anyone. Just when we were about to relax, the front door creaked open. We rushed to see who it was, but no one was there. The door was wide open, letting in the cold night air. Alex shut it quickly and locked it. We checked all the windows, making sure they were secure. Feeling uneasy, we returned to the attic to investigate the suitcase further. But when we reached the top of the stairs, the attic door was shut tight, the lock was fastened from the inside. Panic surged through me as Alex tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. Something's not right, Alex said, his voice strained. Suddenly, the lights in the attic flickered on and off, casting eerie shadows across the hallway. The footsteps started again, louder this time, and they were coming from right above us, the attic. In a desperate attempt to escape, we ran downstairs and out of the house. The cold night air hit us like a slap, but we didn't care. We called our parents and told them everything, though they didn't believe us at first. When they finally returned home, they checked the attic but found nothing out of the ordinary. The suitcase was gone, and the attic was just as we had left it. Our parents said it was probably a prank, but I knew better. The fear I felt that night was real. To this day, we never figured out who or what was trying to get into the house. The suitcase and the strange book were never found again. Every time we hear a creak in the house or a strange noise, we can't help but remember that night. Some things are better left undiscovered, and some memories are too terrifying to forget. I had always heard the stories about the Silent Grove, a patch of dense forest on the outskirts of town where people went missing. The older folks whispered about it like it was some forbidden topic, while the younger ones dared each other to go in. But I wasn't one for dares. I never believed in ghost stories or cursed places. Not until that night. It started like any other evening. My buddy Mark and I had planned a weekend camping trip. We weren't going to the Silent Grove, of course. We were supposed to set up camp in the safer parts of the forest, closer to town. But Mark, being the thrill seeker he was, suggested we check it out, just for fun. I should have said no. I should have turned back the second we crossed the old wooden bridge that led into the grove. But curiosity can be a dangerous thing. The deeper we went into the grove, the more unsettling it became. The air felt heavy, almost like it was pressing down on us. There were no sounds of animals, no rustling leaves, just silence, unnatural silence. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Doesn't this place feel weird? Mark asked, but his voice was already starting to tremble. It was the first time I'd ever heard fear in his voice. It made my stomach tighten. Yeah, I replied, trying to sound calm. Maybe we should head back. But Mark just laughed, though it was forced. Come on, we've come this far. Just a little further. We walked for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. The trees seemed to close in on us, their branches curling like claws. That's when we saw it, a small, decrepit cabin hidden in the undergrowth. It looked ancient, like it had been there for centuries. The wooden walls were rotting, the windows broken, and the door barely hanging on its hinges. But what struck me the most was the smell, a sickly sweet odor that made my skin crawl. Mark, of course, wanted to go inside. I didn't. Everything in my body screamed for me to turn around, to get out of there. But Mark was already at the door, pushing it open with a creak that echoed through the silent trees. The inside was worse. Dust and cobwebs covered every surface. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, circles, triangles, and things I couldn't even begin to understand. But that wasn't the worst part. In the center of the room was a table, and on it a book. A thick, leather-bound book that looked like it had been made from skin. "Dude, check this out," Mark whispered, his eyes wide with excitement. "Don't touch it," I warned, my voice barely a whisper. Something about that book felt wrong. It felt alive. But Mark didn't listen. He reached out, flipping the book open to a random page. The writing inside was in a language I'd never seen before, the letters twisting and turning in impossible ways. And then the whispers started. Soft at first, like the wind through the trees, but growing louder and more insistent. They were coming from the book. Mark's face went pale, and he dropped the book like it had burned him. "We need to go," he muttered, backing away. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind us, the cabin plunging into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. When I finally turned it on, the light flickered weakly, casting long shadows on the walls. The symbols seemed to writhe and pulse, like they were alive, moving to the rhythm of the whispers. And then I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them, glowing in the dark, staring at us from the corners of the room. They were attached to shadowy figures, barely more than outlines, but they were there, watching us. Waiting. "What the hell?" Mark breathed, backing up against the wall. But there was no escape. The figures began to move, slowly at first, but then faster, closing in on us. Their eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light, their mouths opening in silent screams. "We need to get out of here," I shouted, but the door wouldn't budge. It was like it had fused with the frame. The shadows were almost upon us, their cold breath on our necks, their fingers reaching out. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the ground outside the cabin. The sky was dark, the trees looming over me like silent sentinels. Mark was gone. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. I called out for him, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. I don't know how long I searched, but I never found him. The cabin was gone, too, vanished without a trace, as if it had never existed. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd heard. The silent grove had taken him, just like it had taken all those before. I never went back to the grove after that night. No one did. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I can still hear the whispers. And I know, deep down, that Mark is still out there, trapped in that cursed place, forever lost in the shadows.